may say the 38th verse in page number 13. Koti prayaso sura balaka harehe upasane sve hridi chhidravatsataha स्वस्यात्मनः चक्षुरशेषदेहिनाम् सामान्यतः किं विषयोपपादनैः So hey asura balakaha, oh the offspring of the asuras, what is the big difficulty in worshipping Ishvara? So it is not a question, it is a rhetorical question. Means there is no big difficulty in worshipping Ishvara because Ishvara is in one's own heart, Sve Hridi. And he is the present, he is present. Ishvara is present in the heart. You see, when you say Ishvara is present in the heart, you should not give Nama and Rupa to that. So sometimes they make, if you take the spirit, that is fine. Like you open the heart and you find Ishvara sitting there. So not like that. It is not about flesh and opening the flesh and some small Ishvara sitting there. It's not like that. So Ishvara is present in the heart. How? In which way? He is present in the heart as the presence, the being. So, not being this or being that. Generally, being means we want to define it and we want to give a name and shape to the being. Not necessary. So, you need not give a name and shape all the time. Suppose love is there. I just love. Love what? Why to make it loving this or loving this? Why not just love? Like rose is fragrant. Fragrant to whom? Why should you say that? It is just fragrant. It is not trying to be fragrant towards or aiming some people or some other living beings. It is not aiming. The fragrance is not aimed at anybody. It is spontaneous, it is natural, and it is. So similarly, I am love. So whosoever comes near the rose gets the fragrance. Similarly, whosoever comes in my vision, I love. Whosoever it is. Why so? Because I am love essentially. So that is how it is. The being is love. Therefore, it is not the being this or being that. It is just the pure being. Sat. And that's why it is called Chidravat. Space, it is unbounded and it is unattached. Everything is in space, but space is not attached to anything. Space has no shape, no name. I mean, name associated with the space, with the shape. Generally, shape means name will be there. Space is above these things. And the space is unbounded, so asanga it is. Ananta and asanga. That is the comparison with Ishvara. Chidravat. Why like space? Because unbounded and unattached. That is the space. And Ishvara is like that. That's why Ishvara in a jnani's heart and Ishvara in a criminal's heart, one and the same. You know why? Because Ishvara is Chidravat, space-like. The space in a jail and the space in the temple are one and the same. They are not different. The atmosphere in the jail may be different from the atmosphere in the temple, but space is one and the same. Atmosphere is different, but space, no difference. That is the beauty of the space. Sama. So there are a few qualities for space. It is unbounded, ananta, and it is unattached, asanga, and it is sama, equanimous. Same. This is exactly what Ishvara is. Ananta, asanga, and sama. That's why Ishvara is compared with the space. Chidravat is the being which is space-like. So that inner being, that inner silence is the being. Silence is not void. It is the being. And that inner being is the awareness. It shines as the awareness. The being shines as the awareness. And the being is love. It is like the rose. The rose is beautiful and the rose is fragrant. You can put it the other way. The beauty, the rose is beauty itself. It's not that it is beautiful. It is beauty itself. It is fragrance itself. Similarly, the being is the awareness and the being is the love. That is the silence. And that is the silence. Therefore, what is love? Silence is love. So that inner silence, first you get fixed there, get centered there. Now love becomes spontaneous because being is the love. Love of the ego, which is the love which is in the form of a reaction. So the other person has done some service, therefore I love him. It is a reactionary love. A love of the ego and a love of the mind. It is very superficial, and it becomes hate later. You see, in the world, in our lives, we have this funny situation. So first I say, I don't know who is this person, I don't know. Then I say, the person is very beautiful, therefore I love. First is I don't know. Then I know and I see very beautiful, therefore I love. And therefore my girlfriend, next stage. In India you don't have that stage. So in Western countries that is another stage. So my girlfriend. And then marry and therefore my wife. And then some time passes and then I hate. So the person is there. It is not about the person. It is the metamorphosis of the mind. The mind which is not knowing, now seeing for the first time. Not knowing mind becomes for the first time seeing mind. And then it becomes the loving mind. And then it becomes the mind which gives an image, my wife, imaging mind, imaging and demanding mind. And then hating mind. It is all the movement of the mind only. The other person has nothing to do with it, mostly. So the other person is responsible for this movement. So that is also the mind only. It is all the mind. The mind is undergoing such modification all the time. Therefore it is never real, always changing. Whereas the love of the being, it is the other person, I don't know, I love the person. I know, now he met me, I know, I love him. And he helps me a little, I love him. But he doesn't help anymore, he is busy elsewhere, I still love him. And he is a bit unhappy with me, but still I love him. And he is talking against me here and there, doesn't matter, I love him. This love doesn't change. It is the love of the being, like the fragrance of the rose. And that is the Ishvara. That love, that silence of the being, that silence which is love, there you are not there. That silence, there is no me in that love of silence, or in that silence of love. There is no me. There is no mind. It is the pure being. It is there in your heart all the time. Worship that. That is the true God. You worship that God who is there in your heart. Worship that God. And then that God who is in the heart as the pure being, He is your best friend. Swasya atmanaha sakshuhu. He is the sakha. Sakha means sakha. So you are always with it. You are never away from it. That is the sakha. The outward friendship can be there for some time and it can change. Friendship can become enmity. Or friendship can go into the flow of time and you forget. The friends of the childhood are not around now. We forget. So, whereas this friend, you can never forget. Unless you choose to forget, that is a different thing, but there is no need to forget. It is always with you. You forget that friend in you, but that friend will not forget you. Jiva forgets Ishvara, but Ishvara doesn't forget Jiva. Ishvara is always searching for Jiva. Jiva only doesn't search for Ishvara. He can search for Ishvara and get also. So, this is the illustration. This is the tree, the people tree. This body is the tree. And in this tree, I am sitting. On a branch of the tree, I am sitting. And on the same branch, another bird is sitting. I am a bird sitting on this tree. And another bird is sitting. Both birds are beautiful. Dvasuparna. Both are beautiful birds. It's not that Jiva bird is ugly, Ishvara bird is beautiful. No. Jiva bird is also beautiful. You know why? Because Jiva bird is a part and parcel of the Ishvara bird. Never separate. Therefore, Jiva bird is also beautiful. Suparna. Always together. The Jiva bird and the Ishvara bird are always together, never separated. Sayuja, Sakhaya. They love each other because they are part and parcel. Like I love my hand and my hand loves me. It is like that. So, there is no separation really. When you posit a separation, then there is a close relation between the two. Sayuja, Sakhaya. Therefore, as long as you feel the God as distinct from you, so long you should know that God, who is apparently other than you, all right, provisionally other than you, but that God who is still other than you is not away from you in space and not away from you in time. Suppose you say God is in Himalayas or in Kashi or Rameshwaram, then He is away from you in space. You can cover the space, then you can reach there. Suppose you say God is away, God is in Vaikuntha, above, then He is away from you in time, not space anymore. It is away from you in time. So you have to wait for the death to come, then hopefully go there. So, but the truth is not that. The truth is, God is not away from you in space, not away from you in time. He is in your heart. So, and is the best friend that you have. Sakha, best friend. You see, this is it appears very philosophical discourse. Of course, true, it is a philosophical discourse only, but it is very practical also. You see, I tell you, suppose somebody is sick. God forbid, nobody should become sick, but people do become sick. The reason is that is what body is. The body is bound to disintegrate. In fact, there is no sickness in the body. Sickness is creation of the mind. The sickness begins in the mind. It doesn't begin in the body. For example, I tell you, the knees are worn out. The wearing out of the knees. Suppose you are using some instrument in which there is a stationary support thing and then something is rotating all the time, like that classical mortar and pestle where you do chutney and all that. So you are using it for 10 years, 20 years. Now you say the chutney doesn't come properly in it because it has become worn out and very old. So, do you call it sickness? You don't call it sickness. It is a wearing out, which it must, as it must. In time, by constant use, it wears out. The same thing happens to the knees. So why do you say it is a sickness? It is not sickness. It is the mind which says that it should not wear out. Even after wearing out, it should work the same way. But it is not working the same way. Therefore, I call it the sickness. And the entire medical community is supporting me in calling it the sickness. That is the evidence you have. Chor ka gawahi chor. So, it is not chor here. So, ajjal ka gawahi ajjal. So, medical community, I am not saying anything about the medical community, just from the philosophy point of view I am telling. So, they are conditioned to look at it as a disease. I am conditioned to look at it as a disease, and therefore is a collective conditioning. This knee is a disease. It is not a disease. It is the natural consequence of constant use over years. Do you call it disease? It must be abnormal to be called a disease. What is abnormal about it? It is not abnormal. It is normal. If it doesn't wear out, that is abnormal. That it wears out is normal. And so why do you call it disease? I don't want to call it a disease. So now what I do about it? I don't do anything about it. I was running earlier, then I stopped running and started jogging. Then I was jogging earlier, stopped jogging and started walking briskly. And I was walking briskly earlier, now stopped walking briskly and walking a bit slowly. So that is the natural development. As the kneecaps wear out, this is how the development happens. That is natural, this is natural. There is no sickness, there is nothing to be done about it. There is no sickness. This is how people live in India. 90% of the people live the way I described. Only it is the 10% of the people who have means, who have a lot of money to spare, lot of time to spare, and who have a money which is ready, who have a mind which is ready to get worried about it, and so they go after this knee replacement and all that. The psychology, the doctrine which I just now described, it is the doctrine of 90% of Indian population. Means what? This is the majority doctrine. In Indian population is a very big population it is. So 90% of the people follow this. Therefore, anyway, this is a digression, kind of digression, but I wanted to make a point. That's why I described it. God forbid we become sick. As the body must become sick, God forbid one becomes sick. When one is sick, who is the best support for the sick man? Sick person. Who is the best support? Is an insurance policy the best support? Or the medicines? Or the support systems like a hospital and then some assistance in the form of a son, daughter or son-in-law, daughter-in-law, whatever. Or for the Mahatmas, Shishya or whatever. So, or these are all supposed to be very tangible. They are there, you can see them, you can touch them. Medicine, you can gulp it, and the doctor will give an injection. All those things are very tangible. And then there is another support. That is Ishvara. Now, which is the best in all this? In a very practical way, I am telling you, Ishvara is your best bet. You go to hospital, have insurance policy, take medicine, all that you do, but you rely on Ishvara. And in India, they do that. They have a knack of doing that. Modernity disturbs this knack. It takes away this knack from people. So in India, they first accept it as Ishvara. Then they go to the doctor. Doctor is Ishvara. Then they take the medicine. Medicine is Ishvara. And then they get the result. Result is Ishvara. Whether you get the positive result is Ishvara, negative result is Ishvara. Karma phala data. In everything is Ishvara. And therefore, the person doesn't sue the doctor. He doesn't curse the doctor. He doesn't curse anything. He just endures. And he is grateful if it is cured. He is enduring if it is not cured. And he has invested in his emotions or his welfare in Ishvara. He goes through the motions of the medicine, etc., but his main investment of his trust is in Ishvara. And this works very well for majority of Indians. That is how we are surviving. Because in India, the medical systems, etc., the government medical systems are not in good shape, are not in the required extent. They are not there. They are there, but not good enough to cater to the needs of the entire populace. And the private medical systems are there, but they are beyond the reach of the common people. Forget about poor people. Even common people cannot reach there. Very costly it is. And therefore, whatever may be the reason, they have a knack of trusting Ishvara. Put their trust in Ishvara. The other things will be there. Insurance policy, in hospital, doctor, medicine. They are all there. But trust is in Ishvara. I tell you, that is not easy. But I sincerely submit that you have to do this. This is the best bet that a human being has got. You do this, you are safe. You fail to do this, you are in trouble. Because ultimately, your comfort is within. It doesn't come from outside. It is within. Even if you have a nurse, a professional nurse administering service, giving service, a time comes when the nurse goes home and everybody is sleeping and the person has to stay with himself and his sickness. And if the person has already discovered Ishvara in his heart, he is safe. If he fails to do that, he is in real trouble. Therefore, I don't know what method you will adopt. Either you meditate or take to the name of Ishvara, say Rama, etc. Or if you have another method, please do that. If you have a mantra to hold on to, please do that. I don't know what you will do. Ultimately, you should be able to discover that Ishvara in you, and you should be able to trust that Ishvara fully. Then you are safe. The other systems will help. I am not suggesting you reject them. You need not. When they are available, use them. For some people, they are not available. Therefore, they don't bother about them. They don't miss them. If it is not available, they don't miss them. So unless you go and educate them, this is called education. So you educate them, then they will miss everything. So that is what is being said there. Swasyatmanas sakshura shesha dehinam. He is the best refuge available for all human beings. Ashesha dehinam. And he is the best friend, a friend in need. Ishvara in the heart. Samanyatah kim vishayopapadanaihi. Prahlada says, generally everybody is acquiring things. So he says, what is the use of all that? He says like that. I said, without looking at it, I said, okay, insurance policy, doctor, medicine, hospital, let them be in their place. You can make use of them. That is what I said. But he is not saying that way. He is saying, why you acquire all these things unnecessary? That is what he is saying. So, there is no point in accumulating all these things. If you accumulate all these things and fail to have that unconditional trust in Ishvara, then these accumulated things won't help you. If you have unconditional trust in Ishvara, then also these accumulated things have no meaning, because you don't need their help. In either case, this accumulation is uncalled for. Why? Why this accumulation? Vishaya upapadanaihi, getting hold of all these things. So it is translated as what is to be gained through efforts for the acquisition of objects of senses, such efforts being common to all embodied creatures. There is no fun in all that. Just have unconditional trust in Ishvara and be done with it. You are safe. That is what he says. And it is very true. You have to find its truth yourself. I cannot convince you. You are the proof. Whether it is right, you are the proof. Rayah kalatram pashavas sutadayah gruha mahi kunjara kosha bhutayah sarvarthakamaha kshanabhangurayushah kurvanti martyasya kiyat priyam chalaha. So Prahlada is addressing the Asura Balakas, and he is telling a very interesting thing. People have to listen to all this or study it with an open mind. You should not have a conditioned mind. You should have an open mind, which is very difficult. Conditioned mind means there is a kind of an opinion already fixed there. Then an alternate opinion, when it is presented, it will bounce back. It won't penetrate, because there is a wall sitting there in the form of a fixation. So it is difficult to look at some of the things with an open mind. And there is a need for that. That's why I always say that you look at these things, Rayaha is wealth. So he says, this wealth, what will you do with it? Arthakamaha. He is saying sarve arthakamaha. So it could be an artha or it could be a kama. Suppose you are accumulating some wealth to purchase a palace or a home, a big home. You are accumulating some wealth to make a big home. Then this is artha, and home is the kama. But suppose you are accumulating wealth to become a millionaire. Then what is artha? Wealth is the artha. What is the kama? Wealth is the kama. You are accumulating wealth to become wealthy. That is the kama. Therefore artha has become kama. And suppose you are enjoying a pleasure and in the process making some wealth also, like gambling. Gambling is a kama. You want to enjoy it. It is a pleasure. And in the process it brings some wealth also. Suppose you make it. Or some people have some kind of addiction to the stock market. And so it is a pleasure for them. It is a pastime and a pleasure. And so they play it. And in the process occasionally they get some money also. Therefore it is a kama and bringing in artha. Therefore this artha kama, they are interchangeable. They are not, always artha is artha, no. For one it is artha, for the other it is kama. For one it is kama, for the other it is artha. You gamble, that is kama for you, and for the casino guy, it is artha for him. So that it varies. The house always wins. He doesn't put there. He doesn't put there like that. He puts the today's winnings, so that will be rotating. Today, this much is already won. Today, from morning, already $500,000. It is still going up and up. There is the winnings. People are winning all that money. So if all that money people are winning, then are they doing some charity or what? So he doesn't put, by the side he should put, this is all the much money is being won by customers. So the players are winning all this money, and by the side he should put the house never loses. He should put that also, so that it becomes balanced. But no, he doesn't put that part of it. That is an unwritten rule. The house never loses. That is unwritten. It is there. Therefore, for him, it is artha. And for all these people who are sitting there, it is kama. Artha kama. You cannot define it clearly. Therefore, these things, survey, the list he gave, they are artha and they are kama. Rayaha, wealth. So, sarvartha kama. He gives a big list. But before going into the list, I am explaining what are they. They are arthakama. Okay, so what? Kshana bhangurayushaha. They have a lifespan which will end in a moment. Bhangura means like a bubble. This bubble, they make bubbles. In India, for bubble, you have to go to a lake and wait for some bubbles to form, and that becomes an example. But here, these kids make bubbles. There is a small instrument, soap bubble. So why soap bubble? Because it forms easily and remains as a bubble in that shape for a while. That's why soap bubble. Some viscosity, surface tension, those properties are more favorable for bubble formation by making it a little thick with soap. As it is sticking. Like that they blow and many bubbles are formed. These bubbles are very colorful. And they are drifting around lazily. Very beautifully drifting in the wind. And it is a photo op. You can click a few photographs. And you see how many bubbles I have made. The other person got 2-3 bubbles, whereas I made 10-15 bubbles. They are all spreading everywhere. People are nuts, I tell you. What is this bubbles? What is their worth? What is the worth? Kshana bhangur ayushaha. Their lifespan is such short-lived. So is there any meaning in it? Now those kids are doing it. That's why they are kids. Asura balaka. So they are kids. Their intelligence is not enough to understand the deeper things. That's why they are enjoying those bubbles and they are amusing themselves with these bubbles. And the elders, are they any different? No different at all. Absolutely no difference. For a Viveki's vision, what these people are doing? Crazy people. Playing, amusing themselves with bubbles. Arthakamaha are like that. Kshanabhangurayushaha. And kurvanti martyasya kiyat priyam chalaha. Chalaha. Chala means even as the bubble is getting formed, it is dying away. Even as you create it and it is nicely, happily moving around, it is going away. Chala. It is not sitting there. It is going as it comes. In fact, even while coming, it is going. Wealth, even while it is coming into you or into your account, it is going. It's not that it is coming and now it stays and then it will go. No. You imagine like that because you feel good about it by imagining like that. Did you ever pay attention to the flow of time? Kalasya karala ramhasaha. If you pay attention to the time, the way the time is playing with our lives and the speed with which it is running forward, it is scary. Time is like that. But we close our eyes to all that. Like that proverbial cat, which is which is drinking milk, it knows that it is not supposed to drink that milk. It is the lady of the house has boiled milk and kept it. The cat carefully moved the upper lid aside and it is drinking the milk. And it knows that it is in the danger of being beaten. The lady of the home won't allow that. There is a sound made, the lid has fallen and the lady must be coming from behind with a stick. But this cat, it's a proverb. This cat, it is afraid of that lady of the home, which will beat the cat, but it is again tempted towards that milk, and therefore what it comes out with a solution. The solution is it closes the eyes and tries to drink the milk. And it believes, this is the proverb, it believes that by closing the eyes the danger is gone. But the danger is not gone by closing the eyes. The danger persists, and the lady of the house comes from behind and it gives a beating. And so the cat is not safe. We are like that proverbial cat. So we do not pay attention to the ephemeral nature of these riches. They are very ephemeral. Kshana bhangura. They break apart in no time whatsoever. They are all gone. When 9/11 happened, thousands of people became paupers overnight. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, thousands of expatriates ran away from Kuwait city with empty hands, with just the dress which they had on their body is all they possessed. They ran away. And they never got back any of that. They just lost everything. So, it is a sad saga of the wealth, the riches getting disintegrated in no time. In the entire human history it is like that. And but people don't pay attention to their ephemeral nature. They don't pay attention. They close their eyes. Don't pay attention to that part of it. It is like that gambler. He won the stake now, and therefore he is getting a lot of money. He doesn't pay attention to the basic fact that all that money will go away. It won't stay with him. This is the law. Nobody wins in a casino. Nobody wins. If the initially going person wins a little, he wins it temporarily, he will come back. They know it. This is the beginner's luck. So the beginner will come back. And ultimately, at the end of the day, he puts a little money into that kitty, he never gets anything out of it. That is the law. There is no exception to the law. The media tells us there are a few people here and there, they are exception. They are not an exception. No wealth is stable. It is a chanchalam. This is the fact. And finally, to the extent that the wealth stays with this guy, how much happiness will it give to him? Kurvanti kiyat priyam. Not much. Certainly not worth mentioning. So kiyat priyam chalah. This is the list. In that list, the first one I have described. Rayaha. Rayaha is plural, not singular. It means riches. The word is very interesting. In Sanskrit, Rai is rich. Riches. So Rayaha, riches. So riches means why plural? Because there is money in the account. There are homes. You means not you, in general. You have a flat in India, you have one here and one in Manhattan, etc. Like that, a few. So that is another kind of riches. Then stocks, securities. They are called securities. They should be called insecurities because they make us insecure. The moment we remember them, we become insecure. He just sits like this, remembers, and then becomes like that. That is what they are. So these are the multiple forms of wealth. They are the rajaha. You see, why people are attached to the wealth? That is a question, everybody is attached to wealth. A person who is not attached to wealth, he is a liberated soul. He is already very enlightened. On the way to the moksha. So why a person is attached to the wealth? You see, this is a very deep-rooted or deep-seated belief. That is the belief, very deep-seated. It is very difficult to get rid of it. The belief, it is not the truthful belief. It is untruth, but then it is there, very deep-seated. You know what is that belief? With this wealth, whatever it is, 1 million or 10 million, whatever, with this wealth, I am somebody, and without it, I am a nobody. Okay, number one. Number two, I do not like to be a nobody. You see, the day you love to be a nobody, that day you are liberated. That is the secret of attachment. The secret of attachment is you don't like to be nobody. You want to be somebody. So, when the wealth is there, it is my wealth. As long as it is mine, as long as it is mine, it makes me somebody. Because of that, I become somebody. And if that is the deep-seated belief, then the immediate corollary would be, if it is gone, I will be a nobody. That is the logical corollary. So that is the equation. That it makes me somebody, therefore I am attached to that. This is how attachment happens. And what is the truth? The truth is, it doesn't make you a somebody. You are wrongly believing that you are imagining. You see, we are slaves to what we imagine. It is all imagination. You see, wealth is such a thing, it won't help you. It is only just imagine. What happens, the wealth that we accumulate, we put it here and there and there, and it will remain in that place. It won't come with you. It won't stay with you. It always stays away from you. Securities means what? You got a piece of paper with you. The wealth is sitting with somebody else. You know what is wealth? Wealth is that which has a purchasing power. Money, what is it? What is the definition? Economics definition of money? Money is the bond a bond, there is a bond written on that. It is a bond or it's an instrument, an economic instrument or bond which helps you to purchase things. It has a purchasing power. Now I take this wealth, these bonds, every note is a bond. I take all of them and make a big bundle of them and put in an iron box and bury in the earth. Is that wealth? Do you call it wealth? That is not wealth. It fails in the definition of wealth. Everybody knows that. And that's why they don't do that. They put it in the bank. When you put it in the bank, it is wealth. To whom? To whom it is wealth? To you? If it is wealth to you, he won't run the bank there. He will go home. It is not wealth to you, it is wealth to him. But he makes you believe that it is the wealth to you by giving a piece of paper to you. Sometimes that's why in India, when the banks are... Why in India it can happen in an advanced societies also. When the bank goes broke, then who are the losers? He won't lose. The bank CEO, he won't lose anything. You lose. So to lose, you have to lose. To gain, he will gain. You assume that it is your wealth. This is how the modern world functions. And those possessions, ultimately, they are not possessions. They are like a noose to the neck. That is what they are. Rajaha. There was this guy traveling on a ship. Life is a travel on ship. Please take it that way. Don't think life means sitting in a train and going here and there. No, it is a travel in the ship. Because samsara is a samudra. It is an ocean. And the body is the ship. And so we are all traveling. We are all going by a ship. And this person, he has a belt of gold, made of gold. He is rich, In those days, riches are counted in gold. So he has a belt made of gold. And people will steal gold if they keep it outside. There are thieves around. Therefore, he puts all this gold into a belt. And he wears that belt. In sleep, somebody can remove that hook and take away the belt, thief, Therefore, you lock that hook or you seal that hook in such a way that nobody can steal it from you even while you are sleeping. Then there is a shipwreck, which is bound to be there. This body is the ship. It will wreck. It will not remain intact. You see, this class will be like this only. Okay? You are prepared for this, right? Or you get dispirited by all this. You see, this description should not make you sad. It should make you dispassionate. That is the purpose of description. You see, I taught a section of Yoga Vasishtha at some place. They became sad. And then I became sad. You know why? It is not meant for making you sad. It is meant for making you dispassionate. That is what you have to cultivate. It is meant for dispassion, not for sadness. That means it is all taken wrongly. Anyway, so this man, this belt, he tied it to his waist so thoroughly and kind of nobody can remove it from him. And now there was a shipwreck. And now he found that this weight of this belt is pulling him down. And he is drowning because of that weight of that belt. This is the truth of this life. This is the truth. You believe me? This is how it happens. It happens again and again and again and again. The human being does not learn from the experience. Rayaha, riches. What value they have for you? How much joy can they give to you? Kiyat priyam, chalaha. They are so ephemeral, so transient, so mercurial, like chimerical. They are like chimera. Flashes and gone. And so, that is how they attach. That is the mechanism of attachment. Now, what you should do is, you should look at yourself. I do not own anything. Which is a fact. It's not that you have to hypnotize yourself that you own nothing. You have to de-hypnotize yourself. You are hypnotized by believing that this is mine, I own this. You do not own anything. In fact, for your kind information, you do not own your body. Your body is not yours. It is Prithvi Apaha. It is their body. It is not yours. You do not own your body. And you do not own your prana. Prana is breath. Breath going in is prana. Breath going out and then again breath going in is prana. Breath goes out and doesn't come back. It is death. And that prana which keeps the life in this body is not yours. It is not yours. It is the whole. It belongs to the whole. So what is the question of, where is the question of owning wealth, owning riches? Land, you own a land, a piece of land you own? Can anybody own a piece of land? Did you ever think about it? People should be crazy to believe that they own land. Nobody owns land. Land is always there. People come and people go. Once one person went to a piece of land and told, "This is my land." Then the land told him, In Sanskrit it is said, Pitamahaste kva gatah pitacha. Mahabharata. So dear son, your father was saying my land, my land. Your grandfather was saying my land, my land. You check where they have gone. They are not around, they are all gone. Now you are saying my land. I am not your land, I am land. You will be gone, I will be here. So like that. So there is no my land. This is the truth. Therefore, what I do not own anything. There is no my land. There is no my home. There is no my flat. I live in a flat. There is no my flat. I live in a flat. That's all. I do not own anything. I means not Swami, generally. Then what happens, I am very comfortable with myself as a nobody. If the possessions make me somebody, and I am not that somebody because I do not own any possessions, and then that makes me a nobody, then I am very comfortable with that nobody status. I love to be a nobody. I love to be a nobody. So, if there is a stage, there are 5 chairs on the stage, and already occupied by 5 people. And if I am, the circumstances put me there, I love not to be on the stage. I love to be in the audience. Because you are not counted when you are in the audience. If you are on the stage, you will be counted. Means you will become somebody on the stage. In the audience, you are a nobody. I want to lose myself in the audience. I don't want to be counted on the stage. That means I am not attached to the name and form, name and fame. I am not attached. Because I love to be a nobody. I do not possess anything. I am a nobody. I love to be a nobody. I am not attached to the wealth. This is the dynamics of attachment. This is how the dynamics of attachment works. So when you are at home, you are very comfortable with yourself to be a nobody. Means no possessions. I do not own anything and I am very comfortable with it. You see, if you do not own something and you are unhappy about it, then you are attached. If you own something and you are happy about it, you are attached. Attachment, both are attachment. You own it, you have it, and you are attached. You don't have it, still you are attached. Whereas I have it or I don't have it, there is no question of owning anything. I do not own anything, and I am very comfortable with my status as a nobody. Then I am not poor. In fact, I am rich. Because I do not own anything, and as something comes into my hand, I go on giving it up. Who is a rich man? Who is giving up all the time? He is the rich man. Not the one who is accumulating all the time. The one who is accumulating all the time is very poor. He is poor in his heart. That's why he has to put something more together so that he can feel somewhat better. Because he is poor. There is a vacuum in the heart. Whereas a person who is always giving up, keeps nothing, always giving up, owns nothing, he is the richest person in this creation. This is the dynamics of attachment. And therefore, Rayaha said enough about wealth and all that. The second Kalatram. Kalatram is it can be husband, can be wife. Again attachment. You see, I always quote this statement because it captures the vision, the spirit marvelously. But I am always doubtful whether it will ring the bell with people or not. But again, I make an experiment, I make a trial and see how it works. You see, a Mahatma told, a wife and husband went to a Mahatma. And the Mahatma told, don't be a husband. Be the love of a husband towards the wife. Don't be a wife. Be the love of a wife to the husband. You see, once That is the statement. Now you got it or you did not get it, either, whatever. So once you put yourself into a mold, like I am husband, therefore I have to love, it becomes very difficult. Because when the mold is there, I am the husband, then I can only love with certain conditions. Because the husband status is there. There cannot be any unconditional love. There can only be conditional love. The other person, when I am the mold, I am in the mold of husband, the lady is now put in the mold of a wife. And therefore there is an agenda that goes with the image. And therefore she is the wife. I am the husband, therefore she is the wife. And being the wife, this agenda, there is an agenda that she has to fulfill. And as she fulfills that agenda, I love her. Now, do you consider that as love? That is not love. That is attachment. Then what is love? I do not look at myself as husband at all. And therefore, every time I look at her, either in physically or in the mind, every time I look at her, I do not look at her as a wife. The images are not so important. It is their social nomenclature. The society has a structure, and so we all fit into that structure. That is fine. And so, whereas I look at her, how I look at her is not the point. It is all the time. It is neti. How don't I look at her? That is the point. I do not look at her all the time as wife. I look at her as she is. And there are these images, wife and husband, but I am not so deeply connected with those images. And then the love blossoms. As the agenda goes away, the image you keep aside. Do not pay attention to the image, or do not give importance to the image. Then you do not give importance to the agenda that comes with the image. Sometimes the agenda is a social, familial agenda will be there, social agenda will be there. The entire family expects from the image wife, expects something from the image wife. And the society expects something. There is an agenda coming from the society, from the image wife. Then the religion has an agenda for the wife. And the culture has the agenda for the wife. Now it is such a big agenda for the wife. And she has to fulfill that agenda. And I love her. Where is love in that? It is the reverse also is the same. Therefore, let the images be there. Don't be so much devoted to the image. Be devoted to the individual, not to the image. When the image is not important, it will be there, but it is not important in your vision, then true love blossoms. In true love, there is no demand. You don't ask for anything. In true love, in love, there is only giving. There is no taking in love. There is only giving. From your side, there is only giving. You may end up taking a few things because the other person is equally loving. But in love, there is only giving. If you seek, that is not love. That is already attachment. It is, if you seek some advantage, the advantage can be physical. You seek some physical advantage, some convenience. She is the mother of my children, and she cleans the children and feeds them and keeps them in good form, good shape, so that I will drop them near the school. So some physical advantage. So seeking some physical advantage. Then seeking psychological advantage. Means when I become, he is okay now, but when I become sick, she will serve me. Psychological advantage. They are a kind of insurance. Mutual gain. Psychological advantage. It is nothing wrong when the person becomes sick, the wife serves. Nothing wrong, and it should be done also. But you convert it into an insurance. Means it becomes a psychological advantage. You are deriving some psychological advantage. Advantage to whom? To the ego. It is always the advantage of the ego. Now, the situation is not suitable for pure love, and the situation is called attachment. And so people should recognize attachment versus love, and should strive for the love to blossom by negating the attachment. Suppose you keep the attachment intact, then the Kalatram, how much help she can give you, how much psychological advantage she can give you, and whatever psychological advantage she gives, how long will it stay? It is chalam. So that is Kalatram, wife or husband. The topic is between wife and husband. Generally I don't like to discuss this husband and wife thing, but the topic is pushed upon us. So the poet, he pushes before us. Therefore you cannot avoid it. So I tried to do some meaningful discussion of it. Pashavaha, Sutadayaha. Pashavaha means this is the cultural thing. Where are we? How long? When we started? 11:30 we end. Okay, fine. We are doing fine. And then question answers. Okay. So it is the cultural thing. Pashavaha means cattle wealth. So they used to keep cows. In India it is not necessarily cows. People think that India means cows. No, India means not cows. India means buffaloes. At least in South India it is like that. I don't know much about how it works in North India. I did not pay attention. I toured North India a lot, but never paid attention to the village life, how it works there. I don't know whether they keep cows instead of buffaloes. But in South India it is buffaloes, not cows. Nowadays some dairy farms are coming up, factory-like dairy farms, and there maybe they are keeping cows. And in such a situation it is not Goraksha anymore. It is the factory-like, and they engage in killing also. It is all economics which drives the whole thing. It is water buffaloes which are kept. People keep them. Even while we drive on the road, when I go to the class from Secunderabad, I see these water buffaloes on the way. So my class is at 6, and so I generally start at 5:30. That is the time when the water buffaloes return to the base. It is exactly the time. Therefore, near Secunderabad station, so we are passing through the station area. It is highly congested. We don't like to go through that area, but there are no alternate routes. And so that is the only route available for us. And so we will be going through that, crawling through that route every day. And we do it very routinely. And we find these water buffaloes, a dozen of them. They are our colleagues in this effort in passing through all that. Very true. I am not exaggerating. So I don't see cows generally. I see only water buffaloes like that. And then you can see where they are kept also. If you go a little ahead, there is a place where water buffaloes are kept. Pashavaha. This is an old-fashioned way of accumulating wealth. Nowadays, securities are the fashionable way, not Pashavaha. Because very clumsy and nuisance value is more. Whereas securities bills, you can put it in a nice file and keep inside the safe. You are rich. Whereas suppose you have 100 cows, so it is a huge entanglement really. But in those days they used to love that. I don't know how. So Pashavaha. And sometimes in modern times the Pashu can be a dog or a cat or whatever. Some kind of attachment. Sutadayaha. This is again children. The children is again another important topic. But again a kind of difficult topic to deal with, because people are very emotional and sentimental, and when we have to discuss the truth, One has to rise above the sentimentality. Sentimentality doesn't serve any purpose. Love is different and sentimentality is different. It is very unfortunate that most of us desire to shape the child in a way that is gratifying to our own vanity. Like a musician wants his son and or daughter to practice music. Why? Why should you have such an agenda? Is it not an effort to shape the life of a child according to your vanity? Is it not so? This is attachment. And not only attachment, the child is an independent individual, and now the child's, you should allow the shaping of life for the child. You should not convert the shaping of life to the child You should not convert the shaping of life of the child to gratify your vanity. Like I know one family. They hail from a small town called Semmangudi. Semmangudi is in Tamil Nadu. Some of these things are very strong in Tamil Nadu area, I suppose. So I don't see this in Andhra Pradesh. So Semmangudi is a place in Tamil Nadu. It's a village or a town, one of the two. And one great musician came from that place. Some Semmangudi, Srinivas, whatever. Great, he is a great musician. I don't know, but I heard about it. And so this gentleman, he hails from that village. And he has a daughter. And he wants the daughter to learn music. And this man is related, a distant cousin of Semmangudi, Srinivas also. Not only the village, but also some family, some distant relation. Therefore, he feels that it is, he feels very identified with that name Semmangudi, the place Semmangudi. And Semmangudi doesn't mean music only. Semmangudi can be many other things also. But he connects with the music. Therefore, he feels very strongly identified with the music. So now he believes, can you believe this? He believes that it is his tradition, it is his responsibility to keep the tradition, to protect. He has so much of thinking about it. He has to protect the tradition. Can you believe it? He has to protect. People want to protect the tradition. You protect yourself from the samsara. No, not that. They want to protect the tradition. What tradition? What is the tradition of Carnatic music? What is the Carnatic music? Where Carnatic music? When did it start? It started, I suppose, with Tyagaraja Swami. I suppose so. I don't know. So 400 years back, where was your tradition of Semmangudi or Carnatic music? I don't know whether it is there or not. They say all this music came from Samaveda. That means it must have come recently, somewhat recently. I don't know. So he wants to protect. His daughter is very intelligent. I knew her. I talked with her. She is very intelligent. And she is studying well. But she doesn't want music. She is not interested in music. She doesn't mind. She is a very intelligent and very obliging girl. She doesn't mind singing a song here and there. But she doesn't want to devote all her energy to that because she is busy in her studies. And so they want her to study music only, or music and the studies. So this is not proper. I don't know whether I should give such an example. I am sorry if I have hurt anybody's sentiment. Suddenly the example came to my mind and I went ahead with it. In my innocence I did it. So I do not mean anything bad about anybody. But I'm not saying about music and Semmangudi and about a girl and a father. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm saying something about on the part of the parents, trying to shape the life of the child to fit into our vanity, to gratify our vanity. That is something very unfortunate. A doctor says, my daughter or my son should become a doctor. That is very unfortunate, because the child may not want to become a doctor, because one should have a very particular affinity to that field. Doctor means the person should have a very particular affinity. Now, when I was in high school, once I was asked, would you study BPC, BPC biology course, so that you can go to medical field? I said no. You know why? Somebody told me, when you go to BPC in the college, there you have to do experiments. And in the experiment, there is one experiment where they cut open a frog. That is an experiment. It is there. All experiments are not killing only. This experiment is there in biology. In physics, it is about vernier calipers and then pendulum and G, capital G, small g. These are the experiments. And in chemistry, so group 1, group 2, iron, zinc, lead, these are the experiments. I knew what I wanted to study. I said, no biology for me. So, because I don't want to disturb a frog. But without killing a frog, you cannot learn it. So it is not for me. And suppose the parents push me to become a doctor. That is misfortune. And it is all attachment. And people have great vanity. They have some idiosyncrasies, and we want the children to fit into those vanities and idiosyncrasies. And then we try to own the children. We find some comfort. It varies. All parents are not of the same degree, but generally varying degrees of comfort parents have in owning the children. They own the children. They have different comfort levels. Some people own very severely, and then only they are comfortable. Whereas some other people, they own in a very loose way, and they are comfortable with it. So they feel a comfort in owning the children. That is all attachment, and then they want to dominate the children. We want to tell the children how should they think. Not how should they think, what should they think. What should they think, we want to decide. You think about Carnatic music, you think about this ritual, you think about this tradition, or this family, our family. You think, this is what you have to think. This is what we try to teach them. We don't try to teach them how to think. We try to teach them what to think. That is the domination. You want to dominate their thought life. We want to dominate their thought life. No, we are this culture, you should follow it. We are this tradition, you should follow it. You see, what I am saying may sound a bit controversial, but you have to listen with an open mind. We want to dominate their thought life. We do not allow them to create a thought life, independent thought life of their own, and be responsible for that. If there are mistakes in it, you know the mistakes and you learn from them. No. We don't want all that to happen. We should help them to prepare a thought life, by all means, sure, but we should not dominate the thought life. When you do these things, namely you dominate, you own, and you try to shape their life to fit into your idiosyncrasy or your vanity, to gratification of your vanity. When you do that, there is no relationship in it. It is all possessing and demanding and dominating the children, and it is not relationship. It is mere imposition. That is what it is. And the desire to dominate the children, the desire to possess the children, it takes many forms. It takes many subtle forms. Sometimes this desire to dominate the children appears as a self-righteous thing. So it is my right to dominate their life, and it is the right thing to do. So like that. And sometimes, quite often, the parents are very obstinate about it, that they want to dominate the thought life of their children. This is the dynamics of attachment of the parents to their children. I made a genuine attempt to examine the issue. Please understand it that way. I am not criticizing or any such thing. Trying to make a genuine attempt to address an issue, rising above your sentiment and my sentiment. Our sentiments are not the point. The point is, there is an issue which is very sacred and it should be genuinely understood. You can do that only when you have an open mind and you are willing to rise above some of the sentimentality and then social etiquette. You don't allow such fretters to hold you back. Become free like a bird and then examine the issue. That is what I have done. I will conclude this discussion. I have a poem which I have got sometime, somebody gave it to me, and so I have kept it in my papers, and suddenly I found it today morning as if to fit the occasion. It is a poem written by a Sufi poet. His name is a well-known name. Some of you it may ring a bell. The name is Gibran Khalil Gibran. So a well-known poet. He says, the title of the poem is Your Children. And I took this poem because here Sutadayaha. Suta is son, Adi is daughter, son and daughter. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. The life, he puts capital L. When you put capital L for life, it is the cosmic life. Means in Vedanta it is called Hiranyagarbha, the creator, Ishvara. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they don't belong to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts. You see how difficult it is. We want to give love by all means, but we want to give our thoughts also. We are people of agenda in every relation. We have an agenda, we have a demand in every relation. We don't know what is pure love. That's why the poets, the saints and savants, they have put the entire gamut of relationships under attachment. They said it is all sakti, asakti. You give it up. That is how they said. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. The children are very smart. They have their own thoughts. You examine them anytime. When you move a bit away and see from a distance, they have their own thoughts. They are very smart. You may house their bodies, but not their souls. For their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You see, they have a tomorrow. The children, the kids, they have a future, which you can never figure out. What is that future? You can never figure out. For example, my father could never figure out what kind of Swami I would be. He could never figure out. Because I see tennis matches, I give email and all that. Could he ever figure out the type of advanced things that I do? He could never even have imagined that I have something called email, I have a thing called laptop. He could never imagine it. But the same thing with our kids. Their future, you can never imagine what that would be. You never know. And we want to shape them into that future that we don't know. And you want to figure out that future using a horoscope. So what kind of intelligence it is? You want to decide what is the future of this guy using a piece of paper with the help of someone, and then you want to fit that person into that scheme. It is a mere folly, I tell you. You do the horoscope and all that. I am not saying ignorance. Don't try to dictate their lives based on that. That may not fit into their future. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. You know, the children, they are very innocent and are very straightforward and always very positive in their approach. So be like them, try to emulate them, but don't try to make them like you. Always very restricted or constricted and all that. Don't try to let them be free. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. We are the people of yesterday. And we want our children to belong to the same yesterday, which is very unfair. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite. Archer is God, capital A. And he bends you with his might that his arrows may go swift and far. Very beautiful illustration. Like the parents are the bow. The parents are the bow from which the arrows are released. The bows are bent by the archer, who is the God, and the arrows are released. The arrows, the bow doesn't determine the future course of the arrows. The archer determines, the arrows have their own path. Very beautiful illustration. His arrows may go swift and far. His means capital H. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness. For even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. Gibran Khalil. So, a way of seeing the children as God's gift, as God's arrows going through the bow of the parents. And so the parents should remain stable and allow the arrows to go forward. They are the arrows of God. So that kind of a wisdom should be there. There should not be attachment. When there is no attachment, love will blossom, will come back. Hari Om Tat Sat. So that session is